So today I come before you from the Union Auditorium, and I've removed my mask covering to assist those who are hearing impaired and who are watching this address live. The room is actually set up to provide appropriate physical distancing, so I'm at least 13 feet away from anybody in the audience. And so hopefully that'll be helpful for those watching live today. As UCM's 16th president, it is my pleasure to provide for you the 2020 State of the University Address. The video we ran just prior to this address displayed scenes from our move-in, our kickoff experience, and our week of welcome. My thanks to Integrated Marketing Communication for putting that together. And I want to especially thank every one of you who make the move-in, kickoff experience, and week of welcome such a special occasion for our students. I've said it before, and I'll repeat it today. I believe one of our comparative advantages is how we welcome and treat our students. Each year, so many of you volunteer to create the atmosphere for our newest students. Besides our move-in volunteers, staff from housing, staff from student activities, meetings and conference services, and so many others create an engaged environment which starts our students on the right track. So thank you for making UCM feel like home to our students. And what a year this is. Today's address is emblematic of the changes we've made to create both an in-person and on-campus experience for students, as well as a virtual environment for those who prefer a less in-person interaction. As I've already mentioned, I'm speaking to you today from the new Union Auditorium with attendance limited to approximately 20% of the capacity in this room. That, of course, allows for our physical distancing, and we're also providing this address virtually for individuals to ensure that they have access across campus and beyond. I do appreciate those in attendance today and those who are watching remotely. But regardless of where you're watching, your engagement is very meaningful to me. In person today, we have members of our Board of Governors, the President's Council, the Strategic Leadership Team, President's Cabinet, Faculty Senate Executive Committee, Staff Council, and our school chairs. And we also have someone very special to me, my First Lady, Robin. So thank you to each of you who are here today and for those watching remotely. As has been tradition, and by tradition I mean in my last two State of the University addresses, I would like to provide for you a look back at our last year, including updating you on the priorities we identified during that academic year, give you detail on our current state, and highlight what I believe are our priorities for the current year. We must also look beyond the short term and consider our work in future years to ensure we prepare this year for what comes next. I must confess, when I described for you our priorities during the last State of the University address, I never once mentioned pandemic. Now, to be fair, neither did any of you. We had just completed the UCM strategic plan with the 6 themes of student access and success, academic excellence, organizational excellence, inclusive and diverse community, external relations and development, and institutional reputation. Our work for the year began in earnest as we focused on developing metrics and implementing the various initiatives identified within the strategic plan. And that plan would help us achieve our longer-term goals. A key component of last year's address was a highlight of the challenge we faced in recruitment and enrollment. Specifically, we are facing a substantial demographic challenge in our traditional market for students. And frankly, we needed to rethink our enrollment strategy. Thanks to the work of so many on campus, we were able to develop and begin implementing the Strategic Enrollment Management Plan. When the Vice Provost for Enrollment Management position became vacant, we were fortunate to be able to hire Dr. Randall Langston to fill this important role. Under his leadership, this critical work continues and will evolve, as does our environment. Dr. Langston, welcome again to UCM. Glad to have you. At the General Faculty meeting in February, and consistent with the priorities identified within the strategic plan and those identified by the Board of Governors, I shared 13 major initiatives for which we would need to expend considerable effort over that next 18-month period. And while some of these are more extensive than others, it was my full expectation at that time, again, that was just February, that these would be the initiatives that today I would be discussing at length and in depth. So here's a reminder and an update on those initiatives. An enrollment of 10,000 FTE by fall of 2023. Although this remains an admirable goal, it's obvious that the pandemic and any long-term changes in college going rate certainly have impacted our potential to achieve this substantial goal. And realistically, the size of our enrollment is less critical if we don't carefully measure the efficiency with which we generate that enrollment. Although we will and must continue to seek opportunities to grow, we cannot do so at the expense of net revenue. Thus, it will be important that we effectively leverage our financial aid packaging to create smart growth as opposed to just growth for the sake of growth. In that regard, we are placing much responsibility on enrollment management to refine the strategic enrollment management plan and to better utilize the resources committed to that area. Again, welcome, Dr. Langston. We also discussed implementing the instructional faculty promotions policy and procedure and trying to have that done by this fall. Last year saw the Faculty Senate pass and provide to me a significant set of recommendations regarding instructional faculty promotions. Thanks to their leadership and the follow-up efforts from a task force, we have made great strides in this work. And on September 10th, the provost and I will have the opportunity to meet with our instructional faculty to discuss with them the recommendations I have received and our necessary next steps. Thank you, President Locke and members of the Executive Committee for your leadership in this area last year. That was very substantial. We also discussed fully implementing the RCM model, which has been in development since roughly 2014. Needless to say, and for reasons directly related to significant revenue reductions, our ability and desire to change our budget model at this moment is lower. So we've put this initiative on hold. We also discussed finalizing a facilities condition assessment, which is a precursor to gaining much better insight into how we must prioritize investment in our facilities by determining where critical infrastructure needs exist. The good news is that with the leadership of Tim Castelaw, thank you, Tim, we did complete the formal FCA. The bad news is, well, let's just say for $522 million, we could have a slightly above average portfolio of facilities. Important to note, however, is that we cannot let the size of this number dissuade us from making progress in updating our facilities. We must identify funding sources to address deferred maintenance as well as aesthetic improvements. And although the redirect of resources we incurred because of the pandemic response delayed our development of the approach and the strategies that we're going to use to do this, we do remain committed nonetheless. We also had a goal of creating web-based data reports and dashboards for the benefit of the entire campus. And with the work of the staff within the University Analytics and Institutional Research area, which is led by Mung Chin, and more recent efforts from Josh Welker, we have made significant progress towards implementing customizable reports and informative dashboards. Although more work still remains, a solid foundation certainly has been laid. With the passage of Core 42 by the state of Missouri and the implementation of a core set of courses by a statewide group of faculty, including faculty from UCM, it became necessary for us to consider the construct of our general education program, which for those of you who have been here for a while, remember this was an effort that was chaired by Alice Greif, very broad-based, and was implemented in just after 2010 timeframe. This need to take a look at our general education program was further highlighted by the Board of Governors in their call for us to evaluate both the effectiveness and the efficiency of the general education offerings that we had. So it's necessary that we maintain a focus and progress on this initiative with the goal of completion by March of 2022. We discussed revising our annual appointment notifications and creating an electronic-based notification process. These goals do remain on track for completion by next fiscal year. I laid out a case for conducting a campus climate survey with the goal of completing that by next summer. Because campus climate surveys are traditionally conducted through in-person engagement, the timeline for conducting a climate survey was certainly altered by the pandemic. However, we will definitely resume the effort as soon as we can and as soon as it is practical to do so. We discussed the need to enhance our support for the Multicultural and Inclusivity Center, or just the center, as many of us know it by. And although we were able to provide some additional assistance to the area by providing a course release to Dr. Chancellor, which actually, as I'll discuss later, will ultimately benefit all of us in a quite substantial way, there definitely needs to be more done in this particular area to certainly realize the full potential of that center. One effort that we had ongoing was increasing the number of gender-neutral restrooms that we had on campus. And our work here was slowed because of the redirected resources towards COVID-19 response, as well as the general closure of campus. However, we will be able to resume this in the coming days. And we talked about establishing a governmental relations function. So we were fortunate to have hired David Pierce as our Executive Director of Governmental Relations, and to have done so ahead of the scheduled date by which we intended to establish this function. David has been actively engaged with local, state, and federal elected officials and their staff members. We have seen many positive outcomes from his work, including a significantly higher level of engagement with elected officials at all levels of government. So thank you, David. And of course, something that's personal to me, I'd like to see improved campus branding and signage. And our integrated marketing and communication area, which has primary responsibility for doing this, has developed additional branding and signage strategies, which you will begin to see come to fruition on main campus and throughout our satellite facilities in the coming months. Now, as important as these initiatives were and are, it is clear that the strategic plan and the initiatives that emanate from that plan cannot be considered static or inflexible. Certainly, we learned that over the last few months. It's a plan which must change and evolve as new information arrives and as the environment around us changes. While broad goals must be defined sufficiently and with enough foresight to withstand short-term storms, strategies and tactics must quickly evolve and adapt to changing conditions. If we've learned nothing from COVID-19, we must now know that the best laid plans cannot predict nor account for the unpredictable. It's also clear that we must devote continual effort to monitoring and updating the university's strategic plan, and it's critical that this work must involve a broad cross-section of our campus community. To that end, I have asked Dr. Lisa Toms, Vice Provost for Academic Programs and Services, to lead a representative group which will have primary responsibility for monitoring progress towards achievement of strategic goals, making recommendations for alterations to initiatives which are incomplete or outdated, noting any deficiencies in our existing goals in the face of a changing environment, and yes, simplifying and focusing the plan to allow for greater depth instead of breadth. Dr. Toms, thank you for leading that effort. In many ways, last year was about becoming more efficient in our processes and expenditures, which is vital work in an era of declining public funding for higher education. For example, Finance and Administration was able to fully implement Chrome River, which has allowed us to, which I know you all love, which has allowed us to more quickly process, this part you will love, it's allowed us to more quickly process reimbursements. The average reimbursement time now from submission is 7 days, down from 14 days. Money in your pocket, not our pocket. It also allows us to reduce the use of paper, which is certainly saving operating funds for different areas and has a positive impact on the environment. And equally important, it allows our staff within our county area to devote less time to auditing and correcting travel-related reimbursement requests as they come in to the office, because this is now mostly an automated process. Our integrated marketing and communication area generated greater social media traffic, impressions, and engagement, as well as more visits to our website with fewer dollars spent than in the prior year. And behind the scenes, IMC has developed a stronger relationship with enrollment management to enhance our ability to attract students to the University of Central Missouri. And on May 6th, after waiting for more than a year for new rules to be promulgated, we were notified by the Department of Education of revised Title IX guidance, which in many instances differed significantly from prior regulations. We were required to implement the new regulations no later than August 14th. Never mind that there was a pandemic going on. And so thanks to our Title IX Office of General Counsel, the Board of Governors, and your collective quick turnaround on providing input into proposed policy and procedure changes, we were able to have both a revised policy and extensively revised procedures in place by the deadline. And a special congratulations to 24 faculty members who earned promotion in rank and or tenure during the last academic year, effective with this academic year. Such an achievement, given the rigorous and high standards we employ, is a testament to years of steady and hard work. And then there was COVID-19. What started out as a novel coronavirus became formally known as SARS-CoV-2, or simply the virus that causes COVID-19. And what an incredible response you all had, including our FPO staff, who stayed on campus even when we closed, to maintain our facilities and prepare us for what we were able to do fall of 2020. I also appreciate so many staff members who ensured we continued to keep the lights on and that each of us continued to get our direct deposit. In retrospect, last year was an amazing year in so many ways. You accomplished so much. And frankly, I could spend the rest of the day talking about all of your accomplishments, but instead provide you with just a small sample of those many accomplishments. I'd like to share with you this video, which was produced by Integrated Marketing and Communication. what a great year in spite of COVID-19. I want to say we appreciate Britton, in particular for all the work he did on that video and for being tolerant. Every time we told him, would you slow that down just a little bit, please? We can't read that fast. So thank you, Britton. Appreciate that. So today, we find ourselves in the midst of a global pandemic. We must wear masks and maintain distance from each other. Class structures and design in most instances have been radically changed. But the fallout from the global pandemic has been much more extensive than classroom changes, social distancing, or face masks. During the final quarter of fiscal year 2020, we lost approximately $7 million of our state appropriations. And that was across two different withholds, which is about 12% of our total appropriations that we had budgeted for the year. We also estimate that we incurred $4.3 million in response expenditures during the final few months of the fiscal year. Now, we are fortunate that we received a drawdown from the CARES Act allocation from the Department of Education of about $3.45 million. And that was to offset some of these expenses, but obviously it was not a full offset. The pandemic-based uncertainty also put a significant downward pressure on our enrollment. Enrollment for fall of 2020, as of 1 week into the semester, so this is not our official census, stands at 9.2% less than it was during the fall of 2019 official census. Now, this is quite the opposite of what we had expected given the positive trends we were seeing prior to mid-March. This headcount decline also translates into credit hours being about 10% less this year than they were fall of 19. If there's good news in this, we did actually build our revenue forecast on an approximate 10% reduction in credit hours compared to what we actually received last year. So we're tracking very, very close to that macro forecast that we made of revenue. However, within the big revenue forecast, our segments are performing differently than what we actually forecasted them to do. So for example, we actually have more resident students than we forecasted, so we're outperforming there tremendously, but we do have fewer non-resident students than we forecasted. So we're actually trailing fall 2020 revenue forecast at this point by about 2%. Now, some good news in that is we also budget money for scholarships and aid, so some of those non-resident students that we lost, we're also not aiding them. So even though we're trailing the macro number, the big number by about 2%, the net is a little bit better than that at this point. And of course, as you know, there were significant changes to other activities which traditionally occur at this time are just very routine and ordinary on our college campus. So the President's Lawn Concert, for example, was canceled. We postponed the Emeriti Dinner until later in the semester. All of our fall intercollegiate athletics for this fall sports have been suspended until at least the first of the year. Homecoming activities, as we announced yesterday, by and large have been moved to mid-February. And the Distinguished Alumni Dinner, which we normally hold around our homecoming time frame, is going to be postponed until the 2021 homecoming. And these represent just a few of the changes that we've made, and they're changes to certainly our normal experience here at the university. And yet, we persist. As the video demonstrated, we certainly have not let COVID-19 stand in our way of progress. Because of leadership within enrollment management, and particularly through the work of the Success Advising Center and many individuals in areas related to the Success Advising Center, we are currently on track to achieve our second highest first to second year retention in the institution's history. And this is even with the enrollment uncertainty driven by a pandemic. And thanks to leadership from our deans, we were able to complete renovations to several academic spaces, including Fort Edwards 2401, which used to be a tiered classroom, is being converted over into flexible learning space. Wood 100, which received a much needed and long overdue refresh. I think Dean Sawyer is saying amen in the back. and W.C. Morris 422, which was converted from a standard lecture room into an active learning collaborative pod-based room. So a special thank you to Dean Greify, Dean Lee, Dean Sawyer, Dean Mercado for the great work that you've done to ensure that regardless of budget, regardless of pandemic, that we still maintain our focus on our classroom spaces. And more is planned. Indeed, as we approach our sesquicentennial, the large-scale campaign, which we had hoped to launch in conjunction with our 150th anniversary, can't feasibly go forward. Instead, it will be important for us to focus on what is both necessary and achievable. In that regard, the Foundation will partner with our colleges to identify where strategic investment can transform the learning environment, both functionally and aesthetically. Such investment has the immediate impact of enhancing learning and the longer-term impact of aiding retention and recruitment. We cannot neglect the need for all tools for effective learning, nor can we forget the primary and secondary effects associated with a pleasing learning environment. So it asks that our deans and our provosts work in concert with the Foundation to identify important spaces around which we can build targeted mini-campaigns to generate the funds necessary for this work as we go through our sesquicentennial year. So my thanks to Foundation, the Executive Board, shouts out, of the Foundation, and certainly our deans and colleges as we work through that process. And speaking of the sesquicentennial, I look forward to celebrating you as we kick off our official recognition and celebration in March. Our birthday, in reality, is actually around May. So what we're going to do, as we should when you hit 150 years old, is that we're going to continue our celebrations all the way through the year until we culminate in a celebration in our December 2021 commencement. So my thanks to Dr. Amber Clifford Napoleon, who is chairing our sesquicentennial committee, and for all of our sesquicentennial committee members for the work that you're doing in that regard. And as we begin to think beyond where we are today, there's no doubt that our current circumstance has a direct and an immediate impact on what our priorities must be during this current year. Given the context of the last few months, our priorities will not be surprising at all. But our focus on them and ability to achieve a successful outcome in each, and this is critical, will determine our potential to succeed, as well as the very nature of who we are for the next 150 years. So first and foremost, during this fall, we must make significant progress towards aligning our expenditures with our anticipated revenue. As we detailed over the last few months, the significant withhold of $7 million in state appropriations for this fiscal year, which was announced just prior to the start of the fiscal year, was only part of our challenge. We were fortunate to have planned, thanks to the good work of Susan Brockhouse and Bill Hawley, to have planned for about a 10% reduction in state appropriations. $7 million is about 12.5%. So unfortunately, the additional withhold that we received going into this fiscal year, as well as the late withhold we received in fiscal year 2020, the 1st of June, if you recall, that did necessitate that we enact a furlough and pay reduction plan for this current year. And that was to generate additional savings on a temporary basis for this year. And while we were actually aware of the potential for the pandemic-related unenrollment, that allowed us to also build in that impact on the tuition forecast. And so as I mentioned, we're tracking pretty close to that forecast. So the combined impact of a declining tuition, lower state appropriations, and mandatory cost increases for this fiscal year meant that we were facing a $17 million deficit to start the year. And so through a combination of revenue and cost reductions, which I want to be clear, did mean that we eliminated positions that had people in them to start this fiscal year, we were able to generate about $6 million in savings and revenue. So that left our final fiscal year 2021 deficit at just under $11 million. With the support of the board, we are being allowed 2 fiscal years to fully resolve this current deficit. We must, however, be resolute in addressing this remaining deficit and do much of that work in this current year. Although our time period will seem short, and it is, this board action provided for us an opportunity to come together this fall to carefully and thoroughly consider how to meet the challenge. It's critical that through both revenue generation, cost containment, and cost reduction, we address almost $9 million of this year. In case you have thoughts otherwise, this work will not be easy. And I have to be open and honest with you. We can't leave any area nor any program unexamined. And more so, even in the midst of budget reductions, we must have the resolve to make additional investments in areas where there is growth and net revenue potential. Simply cutting equally across the board means simply being less without an ability to realize our full potential and is a disservice to our students and the public we serve. We must also recognize that a focus on revenue generation doesn't mean business as usual, because frankly, there's not as much usual business available for us to take advantage of. And this budget work must be guided by the full understanding that what we do will shape the identity of this institution and determine how well we are positioned to not only survive, but thrive as we move forward. Second priority for this year remains our COVID-19 response. Over the past 5 to 6 months, we have had much discussion about our immediate and intermediate response to the pandemic. And what a response, again, you have had. We've also discussed thoroughly the various adjustments needed in different areas to promote the safety and well-being of our students, staff, and faculty. And although we have not publicly discussed scenario planning and response phases, these are also in place for fall 2020 and beyond if necessary. The key to determining our response is our constant review and evaluation of a series of measures. These measures include, but are not limited to, the total number of active COVID-19 cases and number of new cases among students, how many of those active cases are in our residential facilities, the number of active and new cases among staff, the number of active and new cases among our faculty, changes in each of these metrics over time, the University Health Center stock of personal protective equipment, the University Health Center stock of test kits, the number of cases we have in the county, both Johnson County and Jackson County, the trend in hospitalizations and capacity from our healthcare providers, the testing results turnaround time, and the amount of isolation space available on campus for our residential students. Following the guidance of external experts, we have not drawn bright lines around specific metrics in order to enact additional protocols, because we must consider the context of all of these metrics, as well as other information such as employee absenteeism, ability to conduct contact tracing, and our ability as an institution to provide essential goods and services to our resident population, as well as to deliver education effectively to all of our students. And all of this has to be considered with vigilance for the well-being of all of us. And although there are not bright lines, we are operating with scenarios should we see specific changes in some or all of these measures. Our Emergency Operations Center, which had been in action and activated since essentially the 1st of March, we're now winding that down and transitioning that work to a standing group, recommended a 4-phase approach for our response structure. In a campus-wide email earlier this week, I indicated that we were using such an approach and that I would like to share some of that information with you today. So for simplicity, let's call our current state or our current phase, phase 0. In this phase, we are structured with alternate and modified class delivery models, which you obviously are familiar with. We have mandates and protocols such as face coverings and distancing in place. And we have implemented broad-based messaging and signage regarding these requirements. This, in essence, is our steady state until things get better. Currently, thanks to the vigilance of our students, thanks to the vigilance of our staff, and thanks to the vigilance of our faculty, we are doing a great job on all of these metrics. And so I ask that you continue to take seriously all of the guidelines and requirements we have in place because they are working. However, if we begin to see increases in cases, particularly if we identify these as belonging to a small cluster, if we see a rise in absenteeism among our students, if we observe or receive reports of gatherings of students without face coverings, or if there are changes in any other metrics that don't represent some sort of statistical anomaly, we move into phase 1. And phase 1 involves increasing our communication protocols, including targeting messaging if necessary, enhancing restrictions on gatherings if needed, and potentially moving an office or a course or a few courses into a virtual environment for some period of time. If we begin to see sustained but not large increases in overall disease prevalence, challenges to maintaining our stock of PPE, or challenges to our testing capability, increasing hospitalizations, or large, in this case, greater than 50% impact in a specific area on campus, we would move to phase 2 of our protocols. In phase 2, we might actually see the closure of a building, for example, or all courses within a specific program move into virtual delivery for a designated period of time. Phase 3, which involves moving all of our in-person components of all courses to a virtual environment for 2 to 4 weeks, and limiting staffing on campus, would be enacted if we see larger and sustained increases in cases, the inability of our health center to care for patients adequately, community testing or contact tracing degrades, community spread shows larger and sustained increases, or the community health system begins to reach capacity. Now, as you can see, as much as we like mentally to start dividing things out into distinct groups, these phases, in essence, overlap with each other. So you can see that there's not really a one-size-fits-all and a potentially complex, unique set of responses that we would need based on what we observe. Nor do changes in these metrics as I laid out in each phase need to all occur together. There could be parts of these that would cause us to enact a different phase. So this is a key reason why we have not established automatic triggers for any of these measures. But we have to evaluate the full context of all of the measures and where we are. And of course, then we have what I affectionately refer to as our worst case scenario, and that's phase 4, where we would see the actual closing of our physical campus, much like we saw in March. We would move to virtual environment for the remainder of the semester, and our campus would effectively be closed to the public while remote work is enacted. We would enact such a plan if we, for example, were to see large and sustained increases in disease prevalence among the campus members or within our community. We have high positivity rates, or our community health partners can't keep up with hospitalizations. And of course, there's always the declarations that could occur by federal, state, and local health authorities, which would cause us to move to this phase, even if our on-campus experience was not degraded. So I recognize that there are high levels of uncertainty which create both anxiety and the potential for mistrust, particularly when our system requires a reliance on individuals to make these decisions about the appropriate level of response. So do know that we have and we will continue to consult with health professionals and other experts to guide our approach, and we will certainly adapt to any new guidance. And we always have multiple people watching these metrics to ensure that decisions are not made in isolation. And a third priority for this year is inclusion and diversity. As you noted from the priorities that I shared earlier that I had defined in February for campus, our focus on inclusion and diversity didn't just begin with the killing of George Floyd. And I share this as a priority, not just because of the moment that we're in. In our position as an institute of higher education, we have been called to serve an example of the power of bringing together people of different races, ethnicities, nationalities, religion, and many other points of difference. As you all know, because you work here, the impactful result of this coming together is a strong realization that our similarities are much greater than our differences, and that our differences serve to enhance and strengthen us all. We also have a responsibility to educate all people, and to do so in a way that provides open and honest history and allows that history to demonstrate the negative consequences to all of us when unequal treatment is allowed to persist. I am personally proud of the work we have done over the years to provide an environment that fosters inclusion on this campus. To be clear, we are not a perfect institution, and I have heard stories from our history, and some would even characterize it as modern history, where disparate treatment existed even on our campus. And while we cannot change history, we most certainly can learn from it and strive to be better each day in addressing our shortcomings. But we cannot wait until someone simply comes to us. We must play an active role in eliminating equity gaps so that the pathway to college is available for those who seek it. In that spirit, we are a sponsor of St. Louis Graduates, an organization focused on eliminating equity gaps in post-secondary attainment for Black and low-income individuals. We are also featured as one of only 2 public institutions in the state of Missouri in their 2020 Degrees with Less Debt report for our work in improving progression and doing so with less debt at degree attainment for Black and low-income students. We also have a long-standing relationship and have been a sponsor of College Bound, an organization which works with secondary students, so high school students, from disadvantaged backgrounds to prepare them for college. We sponsor the Hispanic Development Fund, which works within the Latino community to build stronger communities through grant making and scholarships. And we have been heavily involved in the KC Scholars Program. Laurel Hogue is here. She's our primary point person with KC Scholars and has done a tremendous amount of work in developing our relationships and maintaining our relationships with KC Scholars. And that's a program which provides scholarships and other resources to low and modest income students desiring to pursue a post-secondary credit-bearing credential, certificate, or degree. And for 20 years, we have provided the Cesar Chavez Scholarship and the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Scholarship to highlight these individuals and their work and to foster action towards achieving each of their respective dreams. This year, we were invited to be part of the Youth Excited About Sports, or YES, organization's Community Change Initiative, which is intended to create a collaboration between the city of Warrensburg, the University of Central Missouri, and Whiteman Air Force Base, and any individual desiring to bring positive change related to racism. Provost Bridgman, Kirsty Brunsfold, and I, along with many community leaders and Whiteman Air Force Base leaders, are participating in various committees in this organizational structure. And earlier, I indicated that we have been able to provide some additional support to the Multicultural and Inclusivity Center, which will allow Dr. Chancellor to participate in a program that's sponsored by the University of Kansas. And this fall, she'll actually be engaged in training, which will allow her to serve as a trainer on our campus starting in the spring to benefit us in significant ways, and with the ultimate goal of reducing and eliminating systemic racial bias. And although I'm proud of these engagements, I don't highlight them to boast, but to simply acknowledge the necessity of action. Deeds, not words, matter the most. But these current efforts alone are not sufficient. In the last few months, I have heard often that it is the younger generation which must lead this change. Speaking as an older person, I refuse to use as an excuse that any of us might be too old to adapt and change. Nor do I believe that age is a proxy or correlate for racism. However, it is critical that our students be a part of the actions we must take to eliminate the impact of discrimination on the basis of race, gender, and sexual orientation. You see, we are the caretakers of UCM at this moment. But our students will be alumni for life. As such, I ask that our Student Government Association assist us in this work. We need your thoughts, ideas, and insights, and we need our students working hand in hand if we are to truly realize the outcome we desire. Now, I do apologize for using a pandemically incorrect hand-in-hand analogy there, but it is important that we work together. So I recognize the priorities that I just outlined are not lofty or exceptionally ambitious, but they are what's necessary in our current circumstance. The critical nature of these priorities means that we cannot fail to accomplish and achieve in any of them. I have much confidence in our ability to complete this work, and that's because I know you. We will have our differences, because I know you and I know me. But we also have the capability to move beyond those differences and do what we must to move our institution forward. So before I conclude today's address, please indulge me as I express my appreciation to members of the President's Council. These individuals give unselfishly of themselves in service to each of you and our students. Although you often don't get to see them up close and personal in action, I can confirm that they represent each of you well and serve as a strong team of leaders with constant attention to making UCM a better place. And as I close today, I want to share again something I shared during the faculty and staff breakfasts, which we held in February and early March. I am convinced we must constantly remind ourselves of the important and life-altering work we have the privilege of leading each and every day, particularly during trying times such as this, when it's very easy to become hyper-focused on what's happening in this moment. We provide a high-quality advanced education and enriching student experience. That is what we do. How do we do this? Through a focus on student success by committed staff and exceptionally qualified faculty who create a learning-centric curriculum and utilize an applied, hands-on pedagogy. But why? Why do we do this? To transform the lives of our students and create for them opportunities beyond what they ever imagined were possible. And regardless of budget situation, regardless of pandemic, I am unmovable in what I envision for each of us. Students who, when they graduate or complete their experience, they recognize that we cared for them and we're fully committed to their success. A complete and transformative student experience. For us to be a leader in program quality in the region among our peers. And if you missed the video, you see that we're already there in many ways. And to be recognized for offering superior value. And finally, for UCM to be a great place to work. Again, it's my pleasure to be your president. Thank you for being part of this address today and for being a part of the University of Central Missouri. My sincere hope that you have an incredibly successful academic year. Thank you. There's no go-away music today, so thank you guys.